Welcome to the Swine Health Blackbelt Podcast, the latest swine health research digested for you. My name's Dr. Clayton Johnson, your host for today's episode. And joining me is Li Peng, a graduate student at Iowa State University, working with the graduate student team under the direction of Dr. Daniel Linhares. Li Peng is maybe better known to some of our audience as Jack. A little bit easier for those of us English speakers to say. Jack, thank you very much for joining us here today. As I understand, you're joining us actually from a farm right now in China. So you're hard at work, both helping farms and making podcasts right now. Would you like, Jack, to give a brief introduction about yourself to the audience?
Thank you, Clayton. Dear audience, I would like very happy to have this podcast with all of you. And this is Li Peng, and you can call me Jack. And I'm a international graduate student with Dr. Linhares at the team of field epidemiology. And I also am working for Hope Swine Research Institute in China. And that institute was led by Dr. 𝗟�57𝗪𝗀. And very happy to know you all. Very happy to meet you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on the podcast, Jack. You bring a tremendous amount of experience with a disease topic that many of us in North America and South America, we don't have much experience with. And that is specifically the study of African swine fever. You've certainly been involved with farms that have had to go through an elimination, and you've recently published with collaboration from your partners there in China a paper describing the test and removal strategies for ASF, and specifically a whole herd sampling strategy with precision removal of specific animals. Would you like to describe for the audience, Jack, an overview? What does a whole herd sampling program with precision removal look like?
Thank you, Clayton. In China, since the first outbreak of China, the African swine fever virus in 2018, we have no experience before. But in order to eradicate the virus from the field, we have developed a strategy to eliminate the virus from the infected herds. So the thing is, without stamping out policy, we eradicate the virus from the herd. The reason we call it whole herd sampling and precision removal, it means it has two processes. First, to detect the infected animals from the herd by whole herd sampling. Then literally means sampling every individual pig in the herd. And secondly, when you find out the animals and you remove by a biosecure manner, and that's we call it precision removal.
Very good. What are the sample types that you commonly see used to do the whole herd sampling?
In general, we validate the sample type of oropharyngeal swabs as the most effective sample for sampling.
And I assume PCR is the most common test that you use on those oropharyngeal swabs. Could you talk to us about the pooling strategy?
Okay, the pooling strategy is we often pool 3 to 5 samples in one qPCR test. That has not been validated because you do not know the true status of infection. So it's rule of thumb, let's call it.
Very good. And you use commercially available test kits, I would assume, for the PCR. You use ASF PCR primers that are commercially available. There's no need for a special test to do this sort of work?
Yes, we use commercial qPCR test that was licensed by the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs. And that's validated by authorized labs.
Very good. And really, we're taking advantage, Jack, of the slow transmission that we see with ASF. It's not a disease like PED or the 𝗺𝗫𝘁 virus that, once it gets into your herd, it's likely going to have infected almost every pig in your farm. This is a disease that moves much more slowly, and if we can find individual animals, we can potentially remove them and maybe some of their neighbors to create a buffer. Talk to me a little bit about the specific removal. You get a PCR positive test on one animal. What happens next to that animal and maybe other animals around it?
Okay, that's a very good question. Generally, we will not only remove the detected animals. We will, like you said, we will remove the neighboring animals. There are two points we will take into consideration when we do the removal. First is the CT value of the qPCR test. For example, if it is lower than 30, it's a rule of thumb. That means the animals has been infected for a longer time. We need to remove 5 to 10 animals besides the animal. And second, we will do some basic epidemiological studies about what we have done what has been done to this pig. For example, if this pig has just been moved, or it has been vaccinated, we will consider that we will need to remove the whole group of the unvaccinated animals. So that's the 2 points we would like to take into consideration when we do the removal.
Jack, if you have a gilt development barn on your sow farm and the gilts are raised in pens in that situation, could you talk to us a little bit about the diagnostic strategy for gilts and pens versus sows or gilts that are in individual stalls and need to be tested individually? Would you consider doing population samples like oral fluids in the gilts and pens, or is it still the same approach with the oral pharyngeal swabs?
That's also a very good question. We will generally divide the sampling approach into 3 types. First, pen-based, that's for GDU, and also oropharyngeal swabs for the gestation sows that shares the common watering trough. And the third, and also oropharyngeal swabs for the farrowing crates. For the GDU, we often use we use the cotton rope that was used for the pulse detection. So it's a population-based sampling strategy. That's the difference between GDU and other sow types.
And in your experience, has the common rope that we use for oral fluids for many other species, has that been an acceptable sample to find ASF if it is present in the population? Is that a sample that you can trust the results on?
What can we say? It's the most feasible sample like we can find out right now, because the difficulty to sample every individual pig in the pen, we cannot sample every individual pig, but we trust more in sampling every individual pig, especially when we're trying to eliminate virus at very low prevalence.
Very good. Jack, how frequently will a farm go through this process? So if I have an ASF concern at my sow farm and I do my whole herd sampling today, I get a snapshot in time of today and what the prevalence is and where the positives are. I remove those animals plus some buffers on either side. How long do I wait before I repeat that process again? Do I do it once a week, twice a week, every day? What do you see happening in the field?
What happens now is that we do the second round of testing once a week. Like you have mentioned, we call it a paired sampling, because we do not trust the sampling owning for one time, because as you can see that there is incubation period for ASF, so it will be more effective to detect the virus for the virus that is in the incubation time.
Very good. And then, Jack, last question. How many of those samplings in a row that are all negative would you feel comfortable then saying the farm has eliminated the ASF? We have done the whole herd sampling and all the PCRs from every animal has been negative. Would you want 2 in a row samplings, 2 weeks in a row, or 3 in a row, 4 in a row? Do you have a number there that you're confident with?
So we have 2 consecutive negative qPCRs before we can confirm that it's negative. And after these 2 consecutive qPCR negative results, we will wait another 7 days. If we cannot detect any presence of the virus from like clinical abnormal pigs or the environment, we call it negative.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jack. I can't thank you enough for being on the podcast and for all of your work on this subject. For those of us that don't have to deal with ASF directly in herds we work with, we really appreciate your work, Jason's work, the entire team over there at New Hope. They've been thought leaders on this from the beginning. And please share my thanks with Jason. Your openness to sharing will make all of our experience with ASF better if and when we ever have to battle that disease. Thank you very much, Jack, for coming on the show. And to everybody else, thank you for listening to the Swine Health Blackbelt Podcast. Please visit us at swinehealthblackbelt.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast so you won't miss out on the next episode. Thanks for joining us, and see you next week. Hey, everyone. We're always searching for the latest and greatest research to share each week. If you have a swine health-related research trial and would like to come on the show to talk about it with me and share it with our audience, feel free to send an email to healthblackbelt@swineit.com, and we would love to take a look at your research.